The year was 1160, in a small town called Gavignano, nestled in the rolling hills of central Italy. A boy named Lotario dei Conti di Segni was born into the minor nobility, and few could have predicted that this quiet child would one day shake the foundations of Europe. This boy would grow up to be Pope Innocent III, the man who would wield a power so immense that kings and emperors trembled before him, and whose name would be remembered long after his death in 1216. From the start, Lotario was a prodigy. He was sharp, ambitious, and deeply devoted to the church. By the time he reached adulthood, he had mastered law and theology, earning a reputation as a brilliant canonist, the kind of scholar who could twist arguments and scriptures to serve a higher purpose. His intellect was matched only by his vision. He dreamed of a Europe united under the moral authority of the papacy, with the Pope as the ultimate arbiter of kings, kingdoms, and crusades. In 1198, at the age of just 37, Lotario dei Conti di Segni ascended to the papal throne, taking the name Innocent III, a name that would soon echo across Europe like thunder rolling over mountains. From the moment he assumed the papacy, it was clear that this was no ordinary pope. Innocent III was young, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious. He carried with him the confidence of a man who believed that the authority of the papacy was not merely spiritual, but absolute. To him, kings and emperors were not rulers in their own right. They were servants of God, accountable to the man who claimed to act in his name on earth. Unlike many of his predecessors who had contented themselves with managing the affairs of Rome, Innocent III had a vision far grander. He imagined a Europe united under the moral and spiritual authority of the Church, a continent where the Pope's word was law, and where rulers bent their policies and politics to the will of heaven. And he wasted no time in demonstrating the reach of that vision. Almost immediately, Innocent began flexing his extraordinary influence across Europe. He inserted himself into succession disputes in England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, asserting the Church's right to intervene wherever the moral and spiritual order of Christendom seemed threatened. One of the most dramatic confrontations came in England, where King John, later infamous as John Lackland, was attempting to assert independence from Rome. John's defiance was audacious. He sought to control the Church in England, appoint bishops at will, and act as if he were sovereign above spiritual authority. Innocent's response was swift and uncompromising. He placed England under interdict, a terrifying measure that suspended almost all church services. No masses, no baptisms, no marriages, no funerals. Entire towns and villages found themselves cut off from the sacraments, leaving ordinary people terrified for the salvation of their souls. The air was thick with fear, and murmurs of unrest spread quickly. People began to resent their king, seeing him not only as a tyrant, but as a man standing between them and God's grace. Faced with the wrath of a terrified populace and the relentless pressure from the papacy, King John had no choice. Within a year he submitted, performing an act of political and spiritual humiliation. He swore fealty to Innocent III, recognizing the Pope as his overlord. In doing so, he acknowledged a revolutionary truth of the Middle Ages. The Pope's authority could surpass that of kings, shaping the destiny of nations. This episode was more than a victory over a single monarch. It was a declaration to all of Europe. Innocent III had made it clear that no earthly throne could rival the spiritual throne of St. Peter's successor. Kings might wear crowns, but the Pope wielded a different kind of power, one that reached into the hearts and souls of men, compelling obedience not through armies alone, but through fear, faith, and divine authority. From that moment on, Europe began to feel the weight of Innocent III's ambition. He was no mere religious figure. He was a master strategist, a diplomat, and a ruler whose influence would stretch across kingdoms, shaping politics, war, and religion for decades to come. The storm that had descended with his election had only begun. Innocent III's power extended far beyond politics and diplomacy. It was intellectual, spiritual, and profoundly transformative. He understood that to truly rule Europe, a pope had to control not just kings and armies, but hearts, minds, and consciences. In 1215, he convened the Fourth Lateran Council, one of the most monumental gatherings in the history of the Church. Over 400 bishops and cardinals travelled from across Europe, each arriving under the shadow of Innocent's authority, aware that their deliberations would shape the future of Christendom for generations. At this council, Innocent wielded his intellect like a sword. He defined the doctrine of transubstantiation, declaring that during the Eucharist, the bread and wine truly became the body and blood of Christ. A theological declaration that solidified the Church's spiritual supremacy and deepened the devotion of the faithful. He demanded annual confession of sins for all Christians, ensuring that no soul could escape the moral scrutiny of the Church. He tightened clerical discipline, rooting out corruption, and reinforcing the expectation that priests and bishops serve as moral exemplars. With these measures, Innocent was not merely issuing rules. He was reshaping the spiritual and moral fabric of Europe, ensuring that obedience to the Church was woven into every village, town, and court. Yet Innocent's vision of power was never purely spiritual. He understood that earthly influence often required the might of armies. Perhaps his most dramatic and historically infamous assertion of power came in the realm of war. Innocent called for the Fourth Crusade, aiming to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. He preached it with the passion of a prophet, promising participants eternal glory and a direct path to heaven. Across Europe, men took up the cross, inspired by a pope whose authority could rally nations to battle. What Innocent could not have foreseen, however, was how the crusade would spiral into unforeseen consequences. Political intrigue, financial entanglements, and Venetian ambitions diverted the Crusaders, culminating in the shocking sack of Constantinople in 1204. A Christian city, a seat of imperial power, plundered by those who had sworn to defend the faith. The act fractured the unity of Christendom, leaving a scar that would last centuries. Yet it also demonstrated the extraordinary reach of Innocent's influence. Armies could march across continents, entire kingdoms could be mobilized, and even unintended consequences were a testament to the Pope's ability to move the world in accordance with his will. Innocent III was thus a master of both pen and sword, with the intellect to shape doctrine, the authority to reform the clergy, and the vision to command armies. He wielded a power unseen before in Europe. He was not merely a spiritual leader, he was a force capable of reshaping society, politics, and history itself. In every council, in every crusade, in every decree, Innocent III made it clear the Pope did not merely guide Europe, he could control it. Innocent III was also a master of subtlety and manipulation. He orchestrated marriages and annulments to suit the political needs of the Church, deposed kings, and even influenced the election of emperors. He saw himself as God's vicar on earth, a man chosen to guide not only the faithful, but also the rulers of the world. And remarkably, he often succeeded. From France to Hungary, from England to the distant principalities of Italy, his word carried the weight of divine authority. Yet behind the power and pomp, Innocent III was not infallible. His insistence on control sometimes sparked rebellion. The Children's Crusade of 1212, though not directly initiated by him, reflected a Europe restless under papal authority, hungry for spiritual adventure and longing for divine intervention. Innocent would later mourn the tragedy of the children lost in that ill-fated expedition, a reminder that even the most powerful pope could not bend all of history to his will. When Innocent III died in 1216, he left a world transformed. The papacy had reached its zenith. Kings feared the spiritual sanctions he could wield. Emperors bowed before his judgment, and entire nations were guided by the doctrines he enforced. His pontificate was a testament to the extraordinary combination of intellect, ambition, and divine authority, a blend that made him arguably the most powerful pope in history.